What is up, everybody? Welcome to Football Diehards. Today, we're going to go through position by position, and we're going to talk about our plays that stick out on a Wednesday. And this is a week where we really have to monitor the injury news. We'll talk about some of it, but be sure to tune in Sunday, 10 o'clock Eastern Time in the morning. We'll have everything updated by then. But yeah, there's a lot of things we need to look out for in terms of the injuries. So I'm here with Jamie. Jamie, what is up? Are you looking forward to week 5?
Absolutely. It was a good week 4 for me on both sites. So I'm already kind of looking at these prices and the injuries that you spoke of and looking to get some placeholders in there, and we'll go from there.
Good, man. Sounds good. Yeah, for me, tournaments went phenomenal for 2 weeks in a row. Cash was just one. I went with Hubbard instead of Montgomery, which earlier in the week I was like all over Montgomery. Then I kind of got off a little bit. So that got me in cash. But yeah, tournaments were fantastic. Had a lot of Tyreek Hill, who had like 50 DraftKings points. So that was great. And even had some McLaurin as well. So he went off. So yeah, pretty good week overall. Really looking forward to getting to week 5. The season's kind of flying by fast, but as always, we'll start with quarterbacks here. So up in this top range, we have, of course, Kyler Murray up there. We have Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Jalen Hurts, guys like that. So up in this top range, Jamie, who are you looking at?
Quarterback's interesting this week because you're not getting Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Russell Wilson, Lamar Jackson, and Matthew Stafford are all not on the main slate. So this is going to see some interesting condensing of the ownerships. I mean, obviously Kyler Murray, if you have the funds for him at 8,000, he's going to have the most upside of any quarterback with those guys off the main slate. I like Brady, honestly, in that upper echelon a little bit more as a per dollar value. He's coming in lower owned, so we'll have to see where that goes. But I mean, Brady leads the NFL in passing attempts and passing yards. He's got a super stable floor for both cash and GPP. Miami's allowed the 5th highest yards per attempt in the league, and they might be without Byron Jones. So I mean, he could do terrible things to that defense this week. He's got his full complement of wide receivers, minus Gronkowski. So I'm very confident in Brady's floor and ceiling this week. Where are you sitting in the upper range there?
Yeah, for me, I feel like I talk about him every single week, and that is going to be Kyler Murray going against San Francisco here, who does rank 30th thus far in DraftKings points given up to quarterbacks. And yeah, I like Murray. I like his rushing yard upside. Would like a few more rushing attempts than he's been getting, but I think he's always solid. I think he's in a solid spot here. And the weird thing about the totals this week is I think there's 2 games that have over a 50-point total. It is going to be actually, I think it's just one game at 2 games. So it's Green Bay, Cincinnati, and then also the Giants game has a 52.5-point total. So this actually has a pretty good total of 49.5. So I'm with you. I do like Murray up top. I like the matchup. I like the rushing yard upside. Up there as well is going to be Jalen Hurts, who I also seems like I talk about him pretty much every week going against Carolina. I think he's in play as well. Another guy that has a ton of rushing yard upside, 34 rushing attempts on the year. Very solid stacking option with Devonta Smith, who I do like as well, who had about 10 targets last week. So I think Hurts and Murray up there for me. I'm with you. I think Brady's fine as well. Anything else up in this top range?
Where are you sitting on Justin Herbert? I'm kind of back and forth. I mean, the yards per attempt and that the weapons that he's gotten. We saw it against Las Vegas. It's a tough matchup against Cleveland, but they are at home. He's $6,800. He's 100 less than Dak Prescott in the game that you mentioned has the highest total. Is he a cash option for you? Is it a Chargers stack in GPP? What do you think?
It's not a cash option for me, but I don't hate Herbert at all. 6,800. Yeah, the matchup kind of does concern me slightly. I mean, Cleveland's defense is pretty solid there, but like you mentioned, he just has so many stackable options. Preferably for me, Keenan Allen, who's very cheap. I think he's like 6,500, whereas Mike Williams is like overly expensive this week for some reason. So I don't mind some Herbert Allen stacks. Don't mind some Herbert Eckler stacks as well. See, I think Herbert's very interesting. We do take a look at the ownership, and Herbert is coming in pretty low owned. There he is. So 5% owned for Herbert, whereas we have Kyler Murray, who we talked about 15% owned, Kyler Murray being the highest owned quarterback. In terms of projected, Tom Brady, 9%. So out of the ones we kind of talked about, Hurts, 6%. Herbert does come in the lowest out of those guys.
Yeah, which is interesting for GPP for
Yep, for
sure.
sure. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, no,
I
go
was just
ahead.
I was just gonna say, yeah. So in terms of this mid range, let's say 5,500 to 7K. Anybody stick out to you in this range?
Yeah, NFC Offensive Player of the Week, Daniel Jones. It was a good day that Sunday. I had giant stacks in GPPs. They won. They came back from being down 11 in the fourth quarter. He was awesome. The Giants fan in me was giddy. The GPP player in me was giddy. The fact that he rose only $200. He's coming in as the second highest owned quarterback behind Kyler Murray right now. Um, I mean, he's been as criticized as anybody, and often rightfully so. But it looks like it's getting so much better. He's one of only two quarterbacks with a passer rating of 90 or better over the past 5 games, with Kyler being the other. Once again, is leading the league in deep ball accuracy and in percentage of passes completed over 25 yards. He was second in that a year ago. The offensive line is finally doing its job. This is the highest total game. Um, Dallas Dallas has a good defense, but not a good fantasy defense. Like they've allowed the second most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. Jones has rushing upside as well. $6,000 seems like such a bargain. He didn't miss a beat with Shepard and Slayton being out, with Kadarius Toney stepping up in the slot, and John Ross having the deep ball there. Dallas still doesn't have DeMarcus Lawrence. Now they cut Jalen Smith. So I mean, everything seems right for Daniel Jones to be the play for me in cash at 6,000. You like him? Is there anyone else in that range you like better?
Yeah, there are some guys I do like a little bit better, but I don't hate that Daniel Jones call, right? The highest total on the entire slate, 52 and a half DraftKings points. Daniel Jones has actually been pretty solid this year, averaging 24.8 DraftKings points. And you mentioned a really solid matchup against Dallas. So I do like that call. Going up a little bit, somebody that really does stick out to me as well is going to be Sam Darnold for Carolina. And Sam Darnold just keeps on getting it done. If CMC is out, which right now CMC is questionable, which was kind of shocking. I thought he'd be out like at least a couple weeks, but no, he might play this week. If he does not play, I like Sam Darnold even more, and he's doing good, averaging 26.9 DraftKings points per week. He showed some rushing upside as well. Had the rushing touchdown, two rushing touchdowns actually last week, scoring 36.54, which kind of vultured one of my Hubbard touchdowns. So I didn't like that, but still. Darnold's been doing surprisingly really good. I don't mind stacking him up with more as well. Going down a little bit, another guy that stuck out to me, and this is another one we have to monitor throughout the week. If Jimmy Garoppolo does not play, I think Trey Lance could be a very intriguing option at this price tag, 5,700. Going against Arizona, 49.5 point total. And just got to monitor if Jimmy G is indeed out, because I actually do like the San Francisco side quite a bit this week in terms of Deebo Samuel, who we'll talk about. Also, Kittle, who's probably way too cheap as well. So I like Trey Lance down there in terms of down at the bottom. Any thoughts on Lance, Darnold, and then also anybody else down below that you like?
Darnold has 5 rushing touchdowns this year. That's
Great.
incredible. Yeah, Trey Lance it would be my other one. I would still lean the Daniel Jones route in cash, but I'd be hammering Lance in GPP at 5,700. I'm curious to know your thoughts though on that. Do you think him playing would alter the San Francisco passing game so far? I mean, we've seen a complete changing of the guard to Deebo Samuel as the alpha in that offense this year, and that's been with Garoppolo throwing him the ball. Kittle's taken a backseat. Ayuk, other than the 1 week, has been virtually invisible. Do you think Lance's profile helps any of them, cuts down Deebo? You think it helps Deebo even more? That's the interesting one to me with the San Francisco offense.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know, right? We're gonna have to see. It's kind of taking a risk, right? But he is 5,700, so I think I'm willing to take that risk. But in terms of seeing, how the offense does play out, I guess we'll have to see.
Yeah, I think if you are going to stack him in GPPs, I think the way to go is just to kind of go with those usual suspects. And if it if it winds up being a different offense with him, then you tried, and we'll get it the next time. But I think you still go Debo and Kittle if you're double stacking him. because I think he'll lean on his best weapons, who they are.
Yep, for sure, 100%. So I guess there's this one guy that does stick out to me, like really, really cheap, and it's going to be one Jacoby Brissett. And the reason he does stick out to me is because he's going against Tampa Bay, who Tampa Bay has a solid defense all around, but their passing defense is not great whatsoever. They have given up the 25th most DraftKings points in terms of, or they're ranked 25th in terms of giving up DraftKings points to quarterbacks. And you can't really run on Tampa Bay. They have one of, if not the best run defense in the NFL. So teams, pass on them, and teams have success passing on them. And I actually like some of the options in terms of stacking with Brissett this week in terms of Waddle. Will Fuller's going to be on the IR, so I think that does help Waddle there quite a bit. So Brissett is really cheap. I like the matchup. I like the game script. They are 10-point dogs, so you got to imagine they're going to be trailing, coming from behind, passing the ball. Any thoughts on Brissett, or am I getting a little bit too crazy here?
No, I agree 100%. I mean, and uh, just to add on to that, Carlton Davis, Jamel Dean, and Sean Murphy Bunting, the top three corners, are all injured, and Antoine Winfield is in concussion protocol, their top safety. I mean, their back end could wind up being decimated in this one. And like you said, they're 10-point underdogs. Will Fuller being out is going to keep that ownership condensed. Gesicki is all of a sudden becoming a mid tight end one to a high tight end one with Brissett throwing him. I think you can play him alone in any format this week at his price, just based on his role. So yeah, I'm 100% with you on a Miami stack.
Well, looking good. Looks like I thought I was going to be alone on that one, but yeah, I really do like that, especially taking a look at the ownership. Brissett coming in at 1% ownership. See what else we missed. Lance coming in at 2% ownership. That might go up later in the week depending on if Garoppolo does play or not. Anything else sticking out at quarterback, or do you think we should move on to running back?
I think we can go to running back. One more thing on Brissett too. If you're not, definitely the Miami stack. I think you can also play the Tampa defense though, just because of how bad Miami's offensive line is. Brissett's been sacked 10 times since he's taken over for Tua. So there's definitely points to be had with the Tampa in GPP as well. But I'm still all over a Miami stack. I'm with you.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So I say we move to running back, and we'll start up top here in this high range. And of course, we have Derrick Henry, we have Christian McCaffrey, who is questionable, Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook, and Aaron Jones. So out of those five, which one's sticking out to you the most?
Yeah, I'm playing Henry again. I mean, he's got 107 touches over the last over the last 3 weeks, which is insanity. Jaguars have allowed the fifth most fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. Tennessee will be favored again in this one. If either one of those top two receivers are out, it's another 30 carry day for Henry. He did, that whole pass catching thing that we've been so excited about. He did give up passing work to Jeremy McNichols last week, but it just doesn't matter with him. So he's my top guy, and if I'm spending on anyone in cash, it's almost certainly going to be him.
Yep. I mean, I can't disagree there. For me, it is Henry as well. You mentioned a little bit of the pass catching upside for him. I talked about it last week. I don't know if it's still the same. Let's see if he did. Kamara and him. Yeah. So Derrick Henry actually still has more receptions than Alvin Kamara, and we are going into week 5. Like that's just crazy to think about. So yeah, I do like Henry quite a bit. I love the matchup. It seems like he always goes off against Jacksonville. I don't know what it is. I don't know what he has against them, but it seems like every time Derrick Henry does play Jacksonville, he just gets 200 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns. So, yeah, I like the matchup, like the game script, all that good stuff. Dalvin Cook's very interesting because he has probably an even better matchup going against Detroit, who is ranked 31st in terms of running back points given up. I love the matchup, but I guess my only concern with Cook is, and curious to hear your thoughts on him, is if he does, split carries with Madison, if he is somewhat limited. I guess that's my concern. But if Cook is full go, this seems like an absolute smash spot for him. So what are your thoughts on Dalvin Cook this week?
Yeah, this is such a good matchup. I was hoping that after his dud last week that we'd see less ownership early on in the week, but I guess it's not so. I mean, he's looking like he's the second highest owned running back right now. I'm not worried about Alexander Madison. Based on lineup construction, I don't think I'm going to be fitting both of them in, and I'm certainly not picking him over Henry. But Cook's a weird one. I'd like to use him as a GPP pivot, but it's not too much leverage. I mean, I'll just get him in for some ownership in there as well, and I'll try and make some maybe kind of cheap stacks. That Miami stack we talked about, where the quarterback and the receivers are cheap. That might be a good spot to get both Henry and Cook in if you can swing that. But yeah, Detroit is a swinging gate for fantasy points per against running back. So he's in a high smash spot.
Yeah, I think both guys definitely are. Cook was a non-participant in practice today, so we'll see what happens throughout the week there. But yeah, if he is full go, if he's not limited in any type of capacity, I think Dalvin Cook is in a smash spot for sure. And he is 600 cheaper than Henry, but like you said, if I had to pick between the two, it would be Henry. We see that Henry is projected to be the highest owned running back, 23% owned, and Dalvin Cook is projected to be 17% owned. So I guess another guy I want to get your thoughts on, Christian McCaffrey. He is questionable, but if he does come back, that makes it pretty tough because you're going to have Henry, you're going to have Cook, you're going to have McCaffrey. If McCaffrey is playing, do you have any interest in him at all?
If he's playing, absolutely. Christian McCaffrey, an active Christian McCaffrey, should never be $8,700. He's a 10,000 player with his dual ability, rushing and receiving. Hamstrings are tricky, so the re-injury effect is there, especially if he comes back this quickly after they were originally saying it's at least 3 weeks. But he will likely wipe Cook out for me as the leverage play off of Henry in GPP. If he is active, I'll be playing him in GPPs a ton, unless his ownership gets to an uncomfortable level, which I don't think it will. But yeah, absolutely. If he's active, play him.
Yep, agree. It looks like they said he looked real good today in his return to practice. So, if he does play, it's going to be tough to decide who to play between Henry, McCaffrey, Cook. I love all three of those guys up top. So, we talked about the top range a little bit. We can go to the mid range. Anybody sticking out to you in this mid range here?
If we're talking in kind of that $6,000 to $7,000 range, James Robinson is a really nice value to me in this one. At 6,000, he's really taken over as that every down role that we saw last year. He's not as involved in the passing game as I would like him to be, but he's getting all the goal line work that Trevor Lawrence doesn't take. I think that was a bit of an anomaly with those 2 rushing touchdowns he had inside the red zone. But again, you never know with this coach that they got going on here, which looks like it's a circus every day now. So I wouldn't play James Robinson in cash just because of the Jacksonville offense and how volatile I think that can be. But Tennessee is a good matchup for any offense. They don't have a pass rush. They are allowing almost 5 yards per carry, despite not allowing that many fantasy points. They're 14th in DraftKings points allowed to running backs, but they're allowing almost 5 yards per carry. I think it's just the touchdown rate is just not getting them right now, but that could easily change in this one. So he's a nice value at 6,000. I got a few that are less than that I like better, but where are you in that 6 to 7K range?
Yeah, so the two guys that do stick out are actually in the same game together, and that's going to be Zeke Elliott and Saquon Barkley. That game is going to be a 52.5 point total, which is the highest on the slate. And I like Elliott quite a bit. It looks like both guys even are back, right? They're getting a ton of usage, and we talked about it last week. Or I brought it up that we see that Dak Prescott threw the ball 58 times in week 1. And then now after that, 27 passing attempts in week 2, 26 in week 3, 22 in week 4. They're just not passing the ball as much as they did last year when Dak played, and then also after that week 1. And like you said last week, it's really working, and they are making it a focus to get these running backs, especially Zeke Elliott, the ball. So yeah, I do like Zeke quite a bit. He is 7,000, averaging 18.4 DraftKings points. I think it's a really solid matchup against the Giants here. And then on the flip side, Saquon Barkley as well, 52.5 point total, where they are 7 point dogs. And it seems like Barkley is finally back. Seems like he is fully healthy as well, and he's looking good. 40 touches for Barkley in the last 2 weeks combined. So both these running backs, Barkley and Elliott, both in the same game. I have interest in both of them. Any thoughts on either of those guys?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that their pricing is still reflective of them not being to the role that we expected them to be, like if you were drafting them in the first round. I think when they are fully healthy and fully involved, they're $8,000 players, not $7,000, $7,300 players. And like you said, this game environment and this matchup, both should have opportunity to succeed. So I think you can play them in cash, either one of them. I think they're both excellent bringbacks if you're stacking either of the other passing offenses in GPPs. And you can even get a little bit cute and just stack the two of them against each other in GPPs and avoid the passing games, because people will be latched onto those passing games more.
Yep, for sure. I mean, Barkley's coming in at 9% ownership. Elliott, a little bit higher, 14% ownership, which makes Elliott the third highest owned running back. Somebody sandwiched in between them in terms of ownership is going to be Najee Harris. So, really tough matchup against Denver. Pittsburgh does not look good. Their offense does not look good, but Najee Harris keeps getting a ton of targets that it's unreal. 7 targets last week. He had that 19 target game as well. They're using him a lot. They even gave him 15 carries last week also. So, tough matchup. Steelers, do not look great, but with the amount of usage Harris gets, do you think he's a viable play this week?
Yeah, I do. Because of what you said, I would not play him on FanDuel where it's half PPR. Because I think you're banking on the passing game if you play him this week, because Denver has allowed the fewest fantasy points per game to running backs and under 3 yards per carry. This is a terrible, terrible rushing matchup for him. But, like you said, with the pass rush that Denver will have and Roethlisberger's low average depth of target, it's just check down city. So, yeah, I think he's a safe enough floor. If I'm in that range, though, I feel a lot better with the two guys that we spoke about before with Barkley and Elliott, just because they have a rushing floor as well as this. I think this is a game where we see, 10 carries for 28 yards or something along those lines for Najee Harris, and they just have to abandon the run just because it can't go. That being said, we could easily see 10 targets from him in the passing game, which will make up for that. But there is a little more volatility to him this week, just because I don't think he'll get it going on the ground.
Yep, for sure. The Steelers are a team that do pass the ball quite a bit. I remember they had the over-under for Big Ben pass attempts was like 39.5, which is a ton last week. I actually took the over. He had 40 passing attempts, so hit it by 1 there. And I'll probably be betting the over on the Big Ben passing attempts again, depending on where it's lined. But yeah, they do throw the ball a ton, which a lot of those do go to Harris. So we touched on the top tier, touched on the mid-range. So there are some, really cheap guys that do stick out, but we're going to wait for injury news on some. So P. Ryan is 4K. If Mixon is out, I think P. Ryan is a solid play. Fournette is cheap as well. If Bernard's out, I think is a really solid play. If Bernard still does play, I think he's okay still. So P. Ryan, Fournette, and then also Damian Williams for Chicago. So David Montgomery is going to be out, and Williams should be the lead guy against Vegas there. So anything sticking out to you in the bottom range?
You hit on the 3 there. Fournette, though, is if Bernard does remain out, Fournette's my favorite per dollar play of the slate. Probably he should be a lock in cash if Bernard is out. With Ronald Jones doesn't have any trust on that team right now. Fournette carried the ball 20 times against New England, averaging 4.6 yards per carry, and he got 5 targets. So as the workhorse back in one of the most prolific offenses in the NFL at 5,200, Miami has allowed a 100-yard rusher in every game so far this season, and over 5 yards per carry, and the third most points per game, fantasy points per game to the position. So 5,200 is a gift for Fournette. And like you said, I mean, you can play him anyway if Bernard plays, but I do think that does eliminate a bit of his pass catching upside. But if he's running the ball and he's the one that's carrying the load like that, I think he's still fine. But if Bernard is out, then he is like absolutely the guy in Tampa, and he should be locked in.
Yep, agree 100%. Looks like Mixon did not practice Wednesday, so going to have to monitor that. But P. Ryan, he's 4K, he's very cheap, so that's going to be one to monitor. But yeah, I'm with you 100%. I like Fournette. So We see that Fournette right now is 8% owned. We see that Williams is 2% owned right now, and all that's probably going to change quite a bit throughout the week. Anything else stick out to you in terms of running back?
Um, I think we have to mention Damian Harris. The New England running game is getting a little bit dicey because after 23 carries and then 16 carries, Harris has gotten 6 in week 3 and 4 against Tampa Bay. So he's pretty much been a zero the last 2 weeks. But so you can't play him in cash. But I do think he's a good GPP option this week. He gets Houston, which is the get better match for any offense. I think with the low total that they don't even need to pass in this game, the Patriots. So this could be another one where we see 20 to 22 carries from Harris and a touchdown and close to 100 yards. So 5,500, where his price has dropped a little bit. I like him as a GPP pivot off the guys we mentioned that should be higher owned.
Yep. It just sucks for me because I have Harrison season long, and with McCaffrey getting hurt, I was forced to play Harris against Tampa Bay. I knew it was going to be an awful idea, but yeah, you bring up a good point. Tampa Bay has one of the best, if not the best, run defenses in the league. The Saints have a very good run defense, and Houston does not at all. So I feel you there. I feel like they could very well get back to the running game. I think it's the spot to do so. So I think Harris is interesting. Would not play him in cash like you, but I think for tournaments he could be very interesting there. So we will move on to wide receivers. And yeah, so up top we do have Devonte Adams is the most expensive, staying at 8,200. Justin Jefferson below him. Hopkins, Moore, McLaurin, Mike Williams, Deebo Samuel. That is 7K and up. So out of this 6-7 guys, who's sticking out to you the most?
Devontae, I know that's not cute to say, and by his standard, his last game was really pedestrian, as we got the random eruption game from Randall Cobb. But even though he gave up those touchdowns, his floor was still rock solid for cash. He got 11 targets. His target share is 38% in that offense on the year, so he's matchup proof. He's the most bankable wide receiver on the slate when he's playing. His yards per catch average is right at 12, which is elite. And Cincinnati is not not like a top 5 matchup for wide receivers, but it's above average too. So yeah, if you got the funds to spend up for one up there, he's the guy I'm going with.
Yep, can't disagree there. Devonta Adams had a off week last week. Still had 11 targets, but I think it's a great spot for him to bounce back. I don't like seeing that his ownership is 15.9%, which makes him the highest owned wide receiver, but I kind of did expect that, even after coming off of a pretty bad week. I think it's a good spot for Adams to bounce back here for sure. Also up top for me, I think DJ Moore is somebody that I will go back to this week. Last week, it definitely paid off, scoring 34.9 DraftKings points against Dallas there. They did price him up about $900. And this is more so if McCaffrey does play, I don't have as much interest in Moore, especially at the price tag. But if McCaffrey does not play, that's where I'm probably just going to, be pretty heavy on DJ Moore here. He is that guy. 12 targets in his last 2 weeks each game, 12 in week 4, 12 in week 3, 11 in week 2. He's getting the ball. He's getting it a lot. And he's the guy. He's the number one guy there right now. But again, if McCaffrey does come back this week, I won't be as high on him. But yeah, I think DJ Moore is in a really good spot, and a lot of people think so as well. He's the 4th projected highest owned wide receiver there. So what are your thoughts on DJ Moore?
Yeah, he's like you said, he's the guy. I would have won a lot more last week because he was in my lineup all week. I still won my cash lineups, but I wound up forcing in Devonte Adams, and it came at DJ Moore's expense. As it turned out, it wasn't enough to cripple me. But yeah, I would have, my cash lineup would have cashed in the single entries that I had it into if I had DJ Moore in there still. So that was disappointing. But yeah, you can't. It's tough to see his price go up almost $1,000, but you can't deny that it's worthy of it. If he's getting double-digit targets every week and putting up a yard per target and air yards numbers that he is. And Philadelphia is traditionally a pass funnel defense. They've been doing well against wide receivers lately this year, but he's lining up all over the place as well, and that offense is cooking. I think I'm with you that if McCaffrey plays, I'm probably not going to go there, just because that's a target, that's a significant possible hit to his target share. But he's a wide receiver one, and looks like he's going to be that all the way.
Yep, agreed there. So we have some other guys, Hopkins, I think Jefferson's in play. Hopkins, he seems cheap, but kind of inconsistent. There's a lot of guys to throw the ball to in Arizona. You have more Kirk and AJ Green. Don't know how much Hopkins I want to get to this week. McLaurin, I think, is always in play on each and every week. Had him last week in some lineups that worked out. Had 33.3 DraftKings points. Anybody else in this top range?
I like Jefferson a lot. The issue with him is that Thielen is $1,100 less than him. So, and I was wrong on Thielen. I thought, I was not on him in the preseason just because his touchdown rate just seems so unsustainable. And while that was the right call, he's still getting the red zone opportunities, and but his target share between the 20s is back up this year for some reason. I'm not really sure why it took such a hit as it did last year. Jefferson's breakout seemed like the likely culprit that affected Thielen in those between the 20s passes, but it's still happening. I mean, Jefferson is still a wide receiver one, and Thielen is still getting his share as well. So, it's tough to pay for Jefferson when you can seemingly get the same upside with Thielen for $1,100 less.
Yep, for sure. So I say we move on to the mid-range here. So we'll say between 6,500, or we'll go 6,000 to 7,000. What are you looking at here?
There's a lot, and this is going to cause me a lot of issues. I think offhand, my favorite play is CeeDee Lamb at 6,200, and looking at the ownership, there's a couple of things that bother me here. That based on our ownership here, Amari Cooper is the second highest owned at 6,100 at about 14%, and then CeeDee Lamb, who's only $100 more, is at about 8%. I really like Lamb better in this matchup against the Giants. Lamb is the more versatile one to line up outside and in the slot than Cooper this year. So Cooper is a lot likelier bet to see the James Bradbury coverage, who is again earning those elite coverage grades over the last couple of weeks that we saw last year. He was tasked with Marquez Callaway last week. Callaway got some garbage time, but for the most part, he was shut down for the first three quarters. I still like Cooper, and he's still way too cheap for what he is. But Lamb is, for PPR floor. Lamb is the Cowboys receiver that I would pick there of the two, and it's tough to do that if I know I'm picking the lower owned one.
Yeah, regardless, both of these guys are just way too cheap. 6,200 for Lamb and then 6,100 for Cooper. Just way, way, way too cheap. Especially we talked about how that is the highest total on the slate, 52.5. So yeah, I think both guys are in play there. I guess one thing that stuck out to me in this mid 6K range was we see Mike Williams, who's 7,200, had a kind of a dud the other night, and then Keenan Allen is 6,500, and I actually do like Allen at this price tag. Maybe not the most upside in the world, but I feel like he's a pretty safe play at this price tag. With Keenan Allen, you can always count on a ton of targets, a ton of receptions. He even had 11 targets in his last game, 7 receptions, only 36 yards, but still the game before that, 12 targets. The game before that, 8 and 13 in week 1. So I think Keenan Allen's somebody that the targets will be there every game. You know that the reception will be there every game. Maybe not the most upside, only one touchdown on the year, but I think Keenan Allen is a pretty safe play at that price tag. Other than that, I think Deontay Johnson could be a very sneaky play. Curious to see the ownership on him. He's sitting at 6% ownership right now. And the reason being, I think it's the Denver matchup's going to scare a lot of people away. But when Deontay Johnson does play, he's getting a ton of targets. And we talked about how there's a really good chance that Pittsburgh just abandons the run game. It just passes the ball for 4 quarters for the most part. And I think Johnson is somebody that's going to definitely benefit from that. 13 targets in week 4, 12 in week 2, 10 in week 1. He's had at least 10 targets in every single game that he's played. And I guess the one thing you have to worry about with Johnson is that the guy's, he's made out of glass. He gets hurt a lot, but when he is healthy, when he does play, he seems to do very, very good. So, I think Johnson's pretty interesting for me. Anybody else in this mid-range? Any thoughts on Johnson, Allen, guys like that?
Yeah, and I think with these guys in this mid 6,000 range, as much as I love Devonte Adams, there's and he's coming in the highest owned, and he could get 40 DraftKings points easily, but I just don't see the need to go up to him. I mean, you can get 3 solid wide receivers in this 6K range. I mean, you mentioned the two, like Deontay and Keenan Allen. Like, how do you fade them in cash at that price with such a high target floor? It's just too low, and I'm not even really worried about ownership with that. So I'm my early builds have both of them in there, and it's such a stabilizing play, and it frees up the running back positions as well. I think you can also group Chris Godwin in to this mix as well at 6,300. The only issue with him is that his target share hasn't been as stable as Keenan Allen and Deontay Johnson when they're in there. So I'd rank him below those guys, but I mean, there's nothing wrong with him against that Miami defense who can't stop anybody out of the slot, and with Brady throwing him the ball too.
Yep. Yep, agree there. So I think we touched on a lot of the guys in the mid to upper range. So let's say 6,000 and below. Any like value guys sticking out to you?
Yeah, and this is my this is my first glance at the ownership here, and I thought this guy was going to be higher owned. I'm curious to see what happens as we go along here. I guess it's because of the game itself, but Jacoby Myers has 26 targets in the last 2 weeks. He's got 41 for the season. The concern for Cash is that New England controls this game, excuse me, with the run, but it's there's such a condensed target share Myers' way at 5,600. I really like his floor a lot. There's a ton of room for value with that price tag. Houston has allowed 116 points already. They rank 29th in overall DVOA according to Football Outsiders. The over-under on this game is 40, which is tied for the lowest, which I think is keeping people away. But that's Houston is 15, New England is 25 of that 40. So that's not bad. That says they're going to put up some points. So he's a guy that stuck out to me. I don't know if I can play him in cash if he stays as low owned. He's looking at right around between 2 and 3%. But if he does stay that low owned, I'll be smashing him in GPPs for sure, even as one-offs, because I'm not going to stack this game.
Yeah, good call there. 5,600. He's going to get a ton of targets, and the matchup is 100% there. I think Jacoby Myers is a play to look at. Going down a little bit, I think so. There's 2 guys that do stick out for me. One is going to be Marvin Jones Jr., and then one is going to be Chenault. And the reason being is because Chark is out. Don't forget how long he's going to be out. I think it's a while, but Chark's out regardless, and Jones and Chenault are going to get a bump up in the target share. I think it helps both of them, and even like with Chark playing, like Marvin Jones Jr. has had a very good year, 13.5 DraftKings points on average, had 11 targets in week 2, 9 in week 1, 8 in week 3, had an off game in week 4, but I do like Marvin Jones Jr. quite a bit at 5,700. Tennessee has actually given up the most DraftKings points to opposing wide receivers thus far. So Marvin Jones Jr., 5,700, and also Chenault are 2 guys that stuck out to me. Chenault is going to be 4,800. Any thoughts on either of those 2, or do you prefer one over the other?
No, I like them both. Price aside, I would prefer Jones, just because he's had, like you said, the more stable target share. But Chenault's 4,800 is very tough to ignore as the number 2, and I'm pretty sure Chark is done. I thought I saw that they expected him to miss the entire season. So I mean, if he's available in your leagues, if a panicked owner dropped him, go get him. I think the ship might have sailed on that, but if he still is there, go get him. And I think we should also mention that Curtis Samuel is still minimum priced at 3,000 on DraftKings. He's gonna definitely carry some ownership. He didn't practice today though, still with that same groin, so he looks like he just might be a mess this year. But I mean, if he's in there um, at $3,000, it's free. So just keep an eye on that.
Yep, good call there. Some other guys I wanted to get your thoughts on. So Randall Cobb comes back and has a phenomenal game last week, and it was really frustrating because originally before the season started, I saw that Cobb was back on Green Bay. I thought Rodgers and him would have some chemistry. I thought he'd have a good year, and he went out there in week one. I don't think he had even a point. Maybe I think he had one catch in that first game, and then now he goes out here. MVS is out and he has a phenomenal game. So what are your thoughts on Randall Cobb? I don't know if it's point chasing or, maybe he will have some success with MVS being out.
I don't know that it's point chasing. I mean, I'm with you. I thought, if you remember too, like part of Rogers', stipulations of coming back was like that they signed Cobb too. So I expected him to be heavily used as much as he can be as a slot receiver at his age out of the gate. Um, but yeah, with MVS out, I think the short term outlooks of both Cobb and Tunyon improve. Um, Cobb's production was there in the first one, so in this game, I see no reason why it can't happen again. Like you said, other than the Giants Dallas game, this is the only other one with an over 50. So I wouldn't do it in cash, but in GPP for sure. And this game has stack appeal as well, so you can do Rogers, Adams, Cobb with a Bengals bring back or something along those lines.
Yeah, I don't hate that. Yeah, we'll talk about stacks and game by game on Sunday. Can't wait to do that. But anything else sticking out to you in terms of wide receivers? Any value plays?
Um, I would keep an eye out for Sterling Shepard. If he returns at 5,300, he's far too cheap. And if he doesn't return, Kadarius Toney can also be used in that game as his slot replacement, who really broke out last game. He led the NFL in broken tackles in week 4. So keep that in mind.
Sounds good. So yeah, I think that's about it for wide receivers. I say we move on to tight ends, and it's tough. But what I realized is it's pretty tough every week for tight end, and I came to a realization that I might as well just punt down because it seems like when I go up and get Kelsey, he only scores 20 DraftKings points. When I go down and play a player, they don't do good as well. Tight end is just so tricky week after week. So is there anything sticking out to you in this top range? We have Waller, Kittle, Hawkinson, Gronk. Anything up there?
Nah, not really. Obviously, Waller and Kittle are worthy of their price tags. Kittle looks like the highest owned. 5,600 is a bit too cheap for him. But I mean, part of the reason is he has taken a backseat. He for the last few years was the top pass catching option on San Francisco, and he isn't anymore. Deebo Samuel is. Um, Waller, I would feel safer using Waller if spending up. But I'm with you. There's several punts that you can use this week, so I don't see the need to spend up for tight end this week.
Yeah, like I punted last week with Disley and Ingram, and they didn't
I
do
did too.
great. They didn't do great things, but it really helped me do a lot of other things in my lineup where I can go up and get a Tyreek Hill, go up and get a McLaurin, go up and get guys like that, a Henry. So yeah, I think punting down, although they didn't score great, it still helped me have a ton of success last week. So I think punting is the way to go. You talked about Did we talk about Samuel for wide receiver?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, my memory's okay. So, yeah, Samuel's definitely in play. So we will go down to this bottom range then. Mid range, like not much sticks out. Fant doesn't really stick out to me. Schultz is interesting, but in terms of like a pure punt at tight end down in the bottom range, who's sticking out to you?
Well, I mean, the highest I'm willing to go, I think, in that range is Gesicki, who I mentioned before at 4,200. With his usage lately, I think he's viable. But I mean, like you said, we can get much cheaper here. And actually, the one I have in my placeholder right now is Ricky Seals Jones, who is the pure minimum at 2,500. They just put Logan Thomas on IR, he's gonna be out for the next 4 games. Seals Jones only had 2 catches for 19 yards when he replaced Logan Thomas in the last game. But the takeaway is that he ran on 93% of snaps. So that kind of an opportunity at $2,500 is, to me, is the same as Disley last week. And like you said, I used Disley as well. He had 2 catches for 9 yards, I think, and it didn't matter. I cashed easily, still having him, just because of who it let me fit. So that's likely the route I'm going. There's a few if you want to spend a little bit more, but you know he's min priced and he's a starter and he's going to play almost every snap, which is enough for me.
Yep. Looks like we do line up there 100%. Ricky Seals Jones will probably be my go-to in cash and GPP. I like punting down at tight end. Minimum to 2,500. You really don't need much. No Logan Thomas. Had 4 targets last week. Honestly, at 2,500, I'd be happy with 4 targets, 2 catches, but maybe more this week. So I think Jones is the way where I'm going to go this week. You also mentioned Gesicki as well, 4,200. I like both of those. Right now, we see that Seals Jones is coming in at 2% ownership. Gesicki coming in at 3% ownership. Dalton Schultz, another guy that I don't mind, 3% ownership as well. And up top, we have Kittle, 11%, which, yeah, I don't hate Kittle. If I can go up and get him, I don't mind getting him this week. Darren Waller, 8% owned, and then Goddard, 5% owned. That rounds up the top 3. Any other tight end you want to talk about that we didn't mention?
Um, Jared Cook. Jared Cook is interesting to me at 3,600. He isn't the most stable, especially sharing so many targets with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams and Austin Eckler. Um, but he's had over 5 targets in 3 of his 4 games so far. Scored his first touchdown last week. Cleveland is, where's my thing here? Cleveland has been actually very tight against the tight end position this year. They've allowed the 6th fewest fantasy points per game, but last year that wasn't the case. So again, you're kind of betting on the offense there, more so than the matchup.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, in terms
I do have a
of
question. I
defense,
do have a question for you for tight end.
yep.
Are you interested in either New England tight end? They're facing the Texans have allowed the most fantasy points per game to the position. Are you interested in either of them?
Not really, but they're cheap, right? 3,700 for Henry, and then what is it? 3,300, I believe, for Smith. To be honest, not really. Do you have interest in it? But yeah, it's a great matchup, right?
If one of them decides to sit, then I'll smash them. But they're in an equal timeshare. Um, if you like mass multi-entry, get exposure to both. But I don't think you can use them as like your cash tight end, or if you do like 3 entry or single entry as the tight end there. I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, that's kind of my problem. Like it's deciding between one or the other. So if you do the multiple lineups, maybe sprinkle a couple in because I one of them is probably going to have a very good game and they're very cheap as well. Just a great matchup there. But yeah, it's tricky picking between one or the other. I hate doing that. Like in terms of like a Lockett or a Metcalf, guys like that, Jefferson or a Thielen. It's always hard to do. It's always hard to get those right there. So. In terms of the defenses, then, yeah, so I typically like to pay up or pay down, my bad, pay down for defense. But if I was to pay up, I think Patriots are in a great spot, but they are like nearly 5,000. That's crazy. The Buccaneers are in a great spot. They're expensive as well. Broncos going against Pittsburgh, Titans against Jacksonville. Any preferred defense play up top here?
No, I'm with you. I like to spend as little money on defense as possible. I mean, like I said last week, the difference on FanDuel with the defense is that FanDuel caps their pricing on defense at 5,000, and with the looser pricing, you can afford to spend up for that. And actually, me using the Bills on FanDuel saved me in cash from Travis Kelce, as wild as that is. So I fully plan on doing that again if price permits. I haven't checked FanDuel yet or built any lineups, but the Patriots, since it's capped over there, I fully plan on using them as my defense. Can't do it on DraftKings. It's just too expensive. They're more expensive than some running backs. So I'm with you in that lower range. So who are you looking for as of right now?
Yeah, it's so ugly down here. Like I said, top range, I'm probably with you, Patriots. Or I think Broncos are interesting against Pittsburgh. 2,900
Yep.
kind of sticks out. Raiders defense. I think Raiders are in play going against Chicago. No Montgomery, Fields is starting, so I think that's kind of where I'm looking at and at that price. But if I was to really dumpster dive, I think Washington's interesting. I mean, this is a defense that a lot of people, including me, thought were going to be very, very good, and they're now sitting at 2,300 against the Saints. I don't hate that, but man, have they've been awful. But yeah, this will be the cheapest they've been all year. They were actually 3,900 in week 2 against the Giants. They were 3,200 in week 1. So now we see them at 2,300, and they probably deserve to be this low, but I don't mind taking some shots on them against the Saints. How about you?
Yeah, that's who I got in my placeholder right now. Just with the expected sack rate that they were supposed to come in with that front seven of theirs. Um, I'm not really sure, honestly, why it's not clicking just yet. They do have 7 sacks through 4 games, which is not awful, but also not great. So I think with the price dropping so much and being at home um, against a pretty inefficient offense in the Saints right now and a turnover-prone quarterback, I think they'll probably wind up being my choice. Right with them in that ownership range. You got the Eagles, but they are a little bit more worrisome going against Carolina's offense, which has really been clicking. So I think I'm with you on Washington.
Sounds good. So we do see that the Raiders are projected to be the number one owned defense at 10%. The Texans coming in at 8%. The Steelers 7%. Washington 7%, and then the Eagles are 6%. That is rounding out the top 5 there. So yeah, we covered it all, went position by position: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, and defense. Any other final thoughts on the slate or anything else you'd like to point out?
Nope, just watch the injury news throughout because that's going to really change things as far as ownership goes. And make sure to check us out 10 a.m. Eastern on Sunday mornings. We'll go game by game. We'll get you ready.
Yep, 10 o'clock in the morning on Sunday. I'm sure we're going to have a lot more to talk about, tons of injury news that we're going to have to monitor throughout the week. And then on Sunday, we'll go game by game as always. We'll talk some stacks. Most importantly, we'll see how the ownership changed as well. But that's always good to get in on a Wednesday, talk through the players we're looking at first glance, and then on Sunday, round everything out. So, yeah, guys, that's about it. We will see you on Sunday. Good luck